Hey, welcome, Dr. Rachel Maurice, to the Biodigital Convergence Transhumanist Report. This is part three. Thank you for coming back again. We always have very interesting, thought-provoking, inspiring conversations about all kinds of new technologies that are coming into the public domain. So again, thank you for your time. I know you're an extremely busy woman, but we deeply appreciate these conversations, and that you make that available for people online. So thanks again. So first order of business is I'll read your bio. So this is taken from her website. And she is a Canadian medical doctor who worked as an anesthesiologist for 20 years in Canada. She left the practice of conventional medicine in pursuit of helping people heal from root causes of disease rather than only treating the symptoms. Well, I'm really thankful for that because we really need a lot more of that these days, right? So this endless hamster wheel of money these other guys are on, right? But okay, so you got almost 30 years experience in the Western medical system. You've realized the holes and gaps in mainstream medicine and changed the course of your learning. I have gathered together the skills that have been most beneficial to create a toolbox from which I draw from based on your needs. Working with me, you will receive the benefits of years of education and experience in conventional medicine, as well as extensive research and experiential learning of alternative approaches, including applied quantum biology, holographic memory resolution, a unique trauma release method, and self-sabotage mindset coaching, uh, breath work, and medical intuition. Most recently, I dove into a revolutionary technology company called LifeWave. Yeah, I've heard a lot about that recently, and I'm witnessing transformations in the health of people like nothing I've ever seen in my 30 years in the conventional medical system. And I want to share this with the world. And okay, so that's a quick bio. And also, I've got a list of her credentials, education, certifications. Will all be in the Substack write-up. Of course, this is part three. We had other conversations too, and I highly recommend listening to what Dr. Rachel Maurice has to say, because yeah, she sacrificed a lot too to be in the position she's in today, and I really appreciate people like that who, rather than staying in the safety of the general consensus, she's become an out-of-the-box thinker and a pioneer, which I believe is ultimately more beneficial for the health and wellness of mankind. So thanks again. Welcome to the show, Dr. Rachel Maurice. A few more things I got to say just before we get into. I'll highlight the topics of this discussion here. So point number one is going to be about the science of light. What are the differences between natural and artificial light, and what are the problems with artificial light? So that'll be point number one. And point number two is going to be, why is the mitochondria central to our overall health? So we're going to be talking about that. And number three is going to be about what the water inside our bodies, that being the true energy currency. So again, welcome to the show. Thanks for your time. Is there anything you'd like to say right off the bat?
Oh, well, thank you, Tom, and thank you everyone for taking the time to listen and spend with us here. Because what I have realized in particular over the last 5 years is that time is our most precious commodity. So it is to be used wisely and not squandered. So I deeply appreciate the people who are taking the time to spend with us here. So
Yeah, of
yeah,
course.
that and I guess I can get right into how I ended up coming to where I am today. I know I've briefly talked about it before, but also the points that you mentioned, I could talk for hours on each one of them. So obviously it's not going to be too in depth on each of them, but to touch on it and touch on each one of them and make sure that people understand at least the nature of why all of them are so important. And to begin with, coming from the conventional system, when I left in 2021, so that was the fall of 2021, I had a lot of time on my hands and I started doing a lot of research into things that weren't making any sense to me because everything was different than the last previous 30 years that I'd been practicing, different policies coming into effect that were against what I had been taught from a science perspective. And in all of that, we could talk for hours on that as well. But what happened was I came across a neurosurgeon named Dr. Jack Cruz, and I started listening to him. And he completely crumbled the foundation of everything that I had learned in my medical school traditional medical school education. And I started learning from other people as well. It wasn't just him. He was the introduction and the doorway for me. And what I mean by crumbling the foundation is not that everything was incorrect in what I had learned, but the model in which we operate in the modern medical system is the fact that or it's under the premise that our body is a physical entity, it's a physical machine, and it's run by biochemistry, the physiology in the body. And that's what I'd done for my entire career, being in the operating room with medications, with drugs. I would manipulate the biochemistry, and obviously the surgeons would be dealing with the body parts in the OR, whether taking parts out, fixing parts, putting things in. But really, all of the upstream signaling in how we express health in our body, which is not taught in medicine, and to this day, comes from light signaling. And there's a lot of
Mm.
scientific evidence that is uh, verifiable and out there. It's just very spread out, covered up. You have to dig for it. So it's not easy necessarily to find, or it hadn't been. But what I mean by that is, for example, all of our hormones and neurotransmitters, when we focus on the biochemistry of something, like say someone's got a thyroid problem or someone's got reproductive hormone issues, say during menopause, there's changes and fluctuations, or people have cortisol issues. In the modern medical world, we focus on those levels in the bloodstream and we give medications to try to balance those out. And really, what we're doing is causing more imbalances, and we're not figuring out why there are those imbalances. And it would be similar to uh, us taking a car into a mechanic, which I know, so you can relate to this one, taking a car into a
Mhm.
mechanic, and you've got a caution light blinking. And rather than figuring out why the caution light is blinking and rectifying the problem, you just go under wherever you go, under the hood, under the inside the car, the
Mhm.
mechanism, and you disconnect the wires so that um that
Yeah,
light is no longer telling you
a
that
good
there's a
analogy. Yeah, I get it.
so so really we're not getting at the root of the problem. Upstream to all of the biochemistry is light. Light signals all of our hormone and neurotransmitter
Mm.
synthesis. And so there's a whole cascade, and there's such an exquisite dance and exquisite symphony in our body for how we have processes and functions that take place. So you can't really tamper with one thing from a biochemical perspective without affecting everything downstream and even everything upstream. And just to give one example right now, kind of before I talk about a little bit more about light and the natural light versus artificial light, but we have this focus in the modern world, in modern medicine, on cholesterol. I think statins are the most prescribed cholesterol or medication. They're a cholesterol lowering agent, right? They're the most prescribed medication. I believe that is the most prescribed medication nowadays, unless something has overtaken it. But the focus has been on, first of all, that high cholesterol is bad, which it's not. That high cholesterol causes heart disease, which is, again, analogy is, well, the firefighters show up at the fire. Did the firefighters cause the fire, or they're there because there is a fire, right? That's what the cholesterol is actually there to help with the repairs
Mm.
of blood vessels. But cholesterol being high doesn't necessarily come from food. Cholesterol is the backbone to many of our reproductive hormones, our master steroid hormone, pregnenolone, our vitamin D. Um, and if for example, we make vitamin D from the sun when the sun hits our skin. So if we take a vitamin D supplement and we don't actually get outside to have the conversion of the cholesterol to make vitamin D, then we will get a buildup of cholesterol. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So again, when we interfere with medications and drugs, we're not really addressing the problem, and we will have more imbalances upstream and downstream. So I just wanted to give an example of that. And cholesterol is a really big one that's in a hot topic in the world with just about everybody these days. So I'll move on now to light because we talked about that we would be talking about light and natural light and artificial light. And again, not something that I was taught. And this really impacted me because the time that I started learning about it was when I was having some issues myself with major fatigue to the point where I had difficulty keeping my eyes open while driving during the day. And I had tried everything in that was given as a protocol out in the biohacking world by everyone in modern medicine for sleep strategies, and nothing was working. I had quit alcohol, I had quit caffeine. I had, I would go to bed early, I would be in a dark room, have a low room temperature, a lot of these things. And meditation, I'd done meditation for years. Nothing seemed to be working. And I made a few, really two lifestyle changes and had to do with light. And it completely reversed everything for me. I was wide awake during the day. I was not taking anything. Again, these are just two lifestyle changes. And the first one was getting up and seeing the sunrise with my directly into my eyes at sunrise though, and then blocking artificial light at night with blue blockers. So I'm wearing daytime blue blockers right now. Those two things is what did it for me. And it was within about 2 weeks. So it affected me so much that I started learning as much as I could about light and what the impacts and the ramifications were with our physiology and our body. And what I discovered was light is the real driver of all of our physiology. Even the light that we produce within, that is the real communication highway and the superhighway, and why things happen so quickly. Because if we left it up to the biochemistry, we'd be waiting for the molecules, the biochemicals to float around in our blood, which, yes, it does happen fairly quickly, but not fast enough to have 100,000 reactions going on in our body and synchronize that every second of the day. So what's changed in our modern world now is the fact that our ancestors lived under natural light 24 hours. I mean, there was darkness at nighttime, but lived outside 24 hours a day, therefore had were exposed to the natural daylight from sunrise to sunset every single day, connected to the earth, and yes, had firelight, but really had an abundance of this natural light. And so the natural light from the sun is why we are alive. Really, there is a dynamic nature to the light spectrum. So at sunrise, there's an abundance of, I should maybe backtrack a bit to say that although we see natural light as being white when we look outside, we see white light. I mean, the sky is blue, but when it rains, we see a rainbow. So we know that that white light is made up of a spectrum of colors, right? All the way from red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And we also know there's ultraviolet because we know that we need that for creating vitamin D. At least there are a lot more things, but that's what the general public knows, as well as below the red and infrared. There's infrared, right? That we feel as heat. So there's the visible spectrum and then the non-visible, mostly being the ultraviolet and the infrared. And that's all coming from the sun. That is what we respond to. That's what our cells have evolved under. And that is what we respond to in terms of turning functions off and turning functions on, turning functions off in our body. And so at sunrise, we've got an abundance of red and infrared and or a balance between red, infrared, and blue. We've got a low temperature, we've got a lower brightness, but as we make our way to solar noon, we have this crescendo and increasing amounts of the blue and the red, but also then we have a layering of ultraviolet that comes out. So we have about an hour after sunrise, we have ultraviolet A that appears, and then about 2.5 hours after that, we have ultraviolet B that appears. Then we have all of the peak at solar noon, all of the frequencies peak at solar noon, and then they diminish as we get to sunset. Now, in that whole spectrum, there are reasons that we have the different colors, and we've got light receptors in our body, so they tell our body those receptors to do different things. But the blue light that starts out low at sunrise and then peaks at solar noon and then starts to go and diminish by sunset, that is the frequency that tells our body what time of day it is. Our cells don't look at a clock and say, oh, okay, it's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. It goes by the
Sure.
solar clock. So the blue is the key timekeeper. And if we don't get that timing right from the natural light, then our body is not going to know what time of day it is. And it's crucial to know what time of day it is because it has different tasks to run at the different times of day. And imagine if the analogy that I like to use, because most people can understand, is that of an air traffic controller. So we've got a special time clock in our brain, which is a master clock, and it receives the blue light signal through our eyes to tell the time of day, which then sends that signal to all the cells in our body. So imagine an air traffic controller is like the master clock in our brain. That if that air traffic controller were not accurate to tell which planes to take off on which runway, which ones to land on which landing strip, which ones to be in a holding pattern, which ones are taking off and going to which country, different countries, different cities. If we didn't have the air traffic controller, it would be chaos, and there would probably be a lot of accidents and crashes and destruction. So in our body, if we don't have the accurate timing, again, coming from natural light, then we have chaos in our body when it comes to communication. And chaos in the body with communication is really equal to inflammation. So chronic inflammation is one of the foundational layers of chronic illness. So if we can reduce the inflammation, which there are many natural ways of doing that, and one of them is really critical by getting the time right. So seeing natural light, that can help calm the inflammation, which can help alleviate a lot of the symptoms, and in fact, actually reverse some diseases. So the natural light that's what we've evolved under, but now in our modern world, we spend 90% of our lives indoors.
Yeah,
So
especially, yeah, like just a lot of administrative roles too. Like people are working at home, so that ties into that too. Yeah.
yeah, and so when we live indoors now under the guise of energy efficiency, we've got these energy efficient windows, and those windows happen to block two of the most important frequencies that our mitochondria, which we're going to touch on mitochondria, but our mitochondria use, and that is ultraviolet light and red and infrared. So under natural light, when we're outside, from sunrise to sunset, we have a minimum of 50% of the frequencies being red and infrared. So all day long, we're bathing in red and infrared outside. And those are the healing frequencies. So we know that ultraviolet light can be stimulating, it can be it's ionizing, so it can actually be oxidative and cause stress in the body. But we've got the balance of the red and infrared to calm those that inflammation that can arise from the oxidative stress from the ultraviolet light, from the shorter frequencies, and really the energizing frequencies. So when we're indoors, we lack that red and infrared because the windows are blocking that. So then what happens is we're getting an overabundance of blue light that comes through. Plus, a lot of us are on our screens like we're on right now. So we're getting an extra amount of blue light, and
Yeah.
we're under artificial light. Once again, we'll touch on the differences, but that they are mostly blue. They mostly peak in the blue frequencies and lack the energy efficient ones, lack the other frequencies that we get from sunlight. So we're actually bathing in blue light when we are indoors. So we have an excess of blue light when we're indoors and a deficiency of red and infrared, which are the healing. So we're actually putting our bodies under more stress when we're indoors because
Mm.
we're having more of that stressful short wavelength light and we're not getting the red and infrared, which are the healing frequencies.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't know if you had any questions about that.
Though, I mean, I try not to. No, I mean, it's interesting, right, that you're bringing this to light in the way that you're doing, right? I mean, just because we kind of have a little bit of knowledge about that, but not in the detail that you're kind of tabling right now, right? So that's good. No, carry on.
So the problem with the blue light is not inherently bad because we get that blue light. The blue light is the signal for our body to tell time. We get that from the natural light outside, from the sun, but it's balanced, and the real that's the crux of it. It's balanced by all of the other frequencies. There's a dynamic nature with the natural light and the sunlight. There's balance, and nature has designed us to use that. But when we isolate frequencies and we get this overabundance of blue light actually, we can tie this in, but blue lights actually slows down our energy production. So I'll just touch on the mitochondria a little bit now. The mitochondria
Mhm.
are the little organelles, little organs in every single cell that we have, except for mature red blood cells. They make energy. So blue light slows down energy production. That's one of the things that it does. But that's okay when we're outside because red light actually helps speed up energy production. So I'm not going to go into the details of exactly what it does, but there is the biochemistry. There is a mechanism of how this takes place. That's one of the reasons that there's a balance of this. So if we are inside and we're exposed to excess amount of blue light, we're slowing down our metabolism. Blue light also stimulates cortisol. So now under natural conditions with sunrise, we want cortisol. Cortisol, again, although we hear in the media how bad it is, or in the modern medical system, excess cortisol uh, for a large amount of time and in large amounts can be damaging to our body. But cortisol is a natural hormone that we produce, and we need that for our get up and go. Our get up and go hormone. It helps us focus our mind, helps us be able to move around. Ancestrally, we needed to um, catch our food game and go and forage for food. So we need cortisol, and that helps us with our energy during the day. So blue light helps with that, but it's a slow trickle at the beginning of the day with the natural light. At solar noon, that's our peak cortisol production because of the blue light stimulus. So with being in front of technology, what is coming off of our computers, our cell phones, our LED lights, all of the other smart devices that we have, Apple Watches, all those other things, they emit the blue light that is at the peak frequency. So we get peak cortisol stimulation whenever we're in front of any kind of technology because of the blue light that is being emitted. So we're being bombarded by this blue light, which increases our cortisol. So we're having a constant blast of cortisol to our system. So cortisol, other people or some people might remember or know that cortisol actually is part of the fight or flight system. So that's when someone's in fear, or you have to escape from a predator. But now we can do that with our mind. We can get stressed with our mind and actually create that cortisol surge with our mind. And now, in addition, from technology. So what happens is when we have to fight or flee, our body was designed to have a surge of cortisol and make sure that we've got blood glucose, make sure that we've got some kind of food, some source of energy so that we can either fight or run away. And so that is usually glucose. So with the cortisol stimulation, we get a release of glucose into the blood. from whatever stores we have in our liver or in our muscles, and so that our body is ready to fight or run away. So if we are in front of blue light from a computer, let's say, and we get a constant surge of cortisol, we're constantly having glucose flowing through our blood, then we have insulin release, because when we have glucose release into the blood, then we have insulin being stimulated because we need to pull the glucose into the cells for the cells to use it. So now we can, in fact, become insulin resistant without putting any food in our mouth, just by bathing in a lot of this technology that we're in.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I know just myself, sometimes you just wonder why you're experiencing like a little bit more fatigue. Sometimes I think for myself it's from just a lack of rest, to be honest. But yeah, like definitely the time that you spend on technology, it's how we're connected to the world. I mean, I'm glad you're here discussing kind of a little bit of the science behind all this stuff, right? So that now I understand why you wear your blockers too, right? And there's all kinds of things out there too. I mean, because yeah, like some people just their entire life and job and it's all on screens, right? It's just all screen time,
Right. So
so
there are things that can be done, because the
yeah,
the
yeah.
the other thing is, with the blue light, we have blue light receptors. We have blue light receptors on our retina. We have blue light receptors on our skin, actually in our blood vessels, in our fat. So it's not just about through our eyes, but I think it's 90 or 95% uh, of the blue light we get is through our eyes. We do have the blue light receptors on our skin, but the blue light receptors are called melanopsin, and they are attached to vitamin A. And so when blue light strikes that, it actually breaks the bond between the melanopsin and the vitamin A and creates retinol. And so then there's free retinol floating around. Now, normally, once again, our body is evolved under the natural light. We usually have the time and the ability, as well through the red and infrared, to do the repairs to reconnect that bond. But when you're exposed to an excess amount of blue, then you're constantly breaking that bond. And retinol is actually like it it goes around and destroys membranes. It goes around, it destroys cells in the body. So it causes destruction. So that's an extra point. There's lots more that can be talked about, but the importance, like I can't highlight enough the importance of making sure you get as much natural light as possible. If you have to be in front of a screen to get
Hmm.
blocking glasses, so these ones are daytime ones. Again, they're blue blockers, but they don't block 100% of the blue, because you don't want to during the day, because that is the stimulus for it being daytime. If you blocked all of the blue light, then your body would think it's nighttime, and we have different functions that run at night than during the day. So when you just mentioned earlier, you said, sometimes you're tired, you thought you didn't get enough sleep, and
Oh
and
yeah.
maybe
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
So this is something that I talk with people about regularly as well, is even if you get the right number of hours of sleep, because for example, kids who say, well, I have no problem looking at my cell phone right before bed, I still sleep, and I don't have to worry about not looking at my cell phone before bed. But the problem is, as the sun sets, that is naturally when the blue light disappears. And what I talked about earlier is that blue light signal tells our body to produce cortisol. So when the blue light disappears, the cortisol diminishes, and that is the signal for when melatonin should start to rise in our body. And melatonin, I'm sure people have heard about melatonin because there's lots of talk about melatonin supplements, but we naturally make melatonin in our bodies, and that from the pineal gland. We also make it in the cells, but at nighttime, that is what's released from the pineal gland in the absence of light. And if we still look at blue light after the sunset, we're not getting the correct signaling. So we're still going to be producing cortisol all the way up until we're not looking at blue light anymore. Then we will start to produce melatonin. But there's a natural timing and sequence that occurs. We've got this 24-hour cycle with the sunrise and sunset until sunrise again, that our body again has developed a really beautiful harmony and symphony in what needs to be done and when. So if we don't have that correct flow, again, there's miscommunication in the body and things start to break down. So although some people say to me, well, if I go to bed at, or if I stop looking at my phone at 10 o'clock when I go to bed, then I can just start to produce my melatonin. But it's supposed to start when the sun disappears, when the sun has set, because there's a timing sequence. We have melatonin release. There's other hormones as well. We've got growth hormone, oxytocin. There's timing for a hormone called leptin to dock in the brain. And these all have a sequence and an order in which they are released. And if we don't have that sequence and order and the time for it to happen, we won't get the repairs that need to be done in the body. So melatonin is it's a master antioxidant. And what that means is it's one of the most important hormones that does the repair and regeneration. Just like a car, again, you take it to a mechanic, you get repairs, you get maintenance, you have to change out parts, get new parts. The same with our cells. We use them on a day-to-day basis. We have to repair things in there that get damaged. Sometimes there's too much damage. We have to replace the cells. That takes place at night when we sleep, but we also need proper amounts of melatonin. So you can get the correct number of hours of sleep that people think we should be getting, say, let's say 8 hours of sleep at night. But if you don't have the hormones floating around in your blood to do the repair, being able to make the right communication and signaling to all of the repair mechanisms, the stem cells to come in and say, hey, these cells need repairing or replacing, then you're not going to get the quality and you're not going to get the repair that actually take place.
Yeah, I'm guilty of everything you basically just talked about because I'll be on my cell phone just before like I'm going to bed, checking whatever, right? And I could try not doing that too and just seeing if it does make a difference because lately, I do find myself just I'm not sure whether it's work related, but even when I'm on days off too, it just a general level of like just perpetual ongoing fatigue. I'm sure it's a multitude of reasons why, but that's definitely probably one of the reasons. And what I like too is you're looking at the level of the light signaling as being the root cause, right? That triggers the biochemistry, right? Is basically what you're trying to tell us. So light is triggering the biochemistry. The biochemistry is very observable, right? Like but when you get into light, to observe that it takes a different level of technology to understand what's actually really going on, right? That's triggering these things. I like what you're saying here because I think that's right. There's different layers of control that trigger the final effects of the body. I've always, like I could say, believed in that, right? But you're talking about it from a place of understanding and science, right?
Right.
So,
And just how really within 2 weeks for myself, like I told you the story at the beginning, I had
yeah.
severe fatigue
Okay.
and I mean, my
So,
sleep was disrupted and part of me thought that that really was it. But changing two things had such a profound impact and they were simple. And, there's blue blocking glasses. You can get expensive ones. You can get reasonably
yeah.
priced ones, but getting up and getting as much natural light as possible, getting out at sunrise. I mean, sunrise is really critical because it sets the motor for our ATP production in our mitochondria. It sets it to spin the correct way. If you don't actually get out at sunrise, it's not going to spin the correct way. And we have a
Well, does it
whole,
spin the opposite way? Like what happens if you don't? Like
yeah, well, so it does need to go. So if we can move on to the mitochondria now at this point, if you want to,
if you want, yeah, yeah. If I'm cutting you off too much, just tell me to zip it and then we'll carry on with your thought flow.
no, that's
Or we
okay,
can
but
go
it leads in to the mitochondria, the ATP
perfect.
leads into
Perfect. Let's do it
mitochondria.
then. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
most people would have heard about the mitochondria as quote unquote the powerhouses of the cell because they produce
Yes, I've heard that. Yeah.
ATP, right? I mean, I think that's grade 8 science if people can remember back
Yeah,
to that.
that's about all I've got, like that's where I'm at. So yeah, you have to level with us.
Well, we didn't learn much more in
Okay.
even in I did my bachelor's of science in microbiology and immunology, and then in medical school, we still learned that the mitochondria make ATP, which is the energy currency of the cell, and the byproducts are water and carbon dioxide. That's basically what we learned. We learned how sugar gets pulled in, broken down into glycolysis, fed through this whole process, these cycles, and churn out ATP. So really, mitochondria do so much more, and the water and carbon dioxide are not byproducts of of what the mitochondria make. They are actually extremely important products. And we also have heard a lot about radical oxygen species, reactive oxygen species, maybe oxidative stress, free radicals as damaging the body. And so that's why a lot of people focus on, say, ingesting antioxidants, right? We hear a lot about antioxidants in the different fruits and the berries. And
Yeah.
a lot of people take superfoods because they want to inundate their bodies with antioxidants. But again, what I have learned now through this whole process of quantum biology and learning about mitochondria is those reactive oxygen species are produced in the mitochondria as well. They are signaling agents as well. So it's when there is misfiring of the mitochondria and the mitochondrial breakdown that there's an excess of those species that they become a problem. But we don't want to completely eliminate them because they're signaling molecules. They're extremely crucial. So when you inundate your body with an abundance and overabundance of antioxidants from plants and superfoods and such, once again, people thinking they're doing something that's healthy, it's actually more of a problem. So the mitochondria, they are also sensory organs. They receive information, they receive frequencies. They're like an antenna. They emit frequencies. And when they sense danger, they actually go into what's called the cell danger response. They go into a hibernation mode. They shut down energy production and they wait for that danger to disappear. So in our modern world, we've got that danger signal happening all the time. We're swimming in the non-natural
Hmm.
electromagnetic frequencies that we can't see, so we don't take it as seriously as something that we do see.
Yeah, that's right.
But our cells are sensing that. Our mitochondria are sensing that. We've got a lot of stress in our heads. There's a lot of fear that's pumped out into society through the
Yeah.
media, through the news. If you watch scary movies, if you are listening to anything that is creating fear or anxiety in your body, that's also a danger signal for your mitochondria. We've got a lot of toxins in our food, in our water, in the air. Once again, we might not necessarily consciously be aware of it, but our cells are sensing it. So there's a danger response that our mitochondria are sensing. But we can live with up to 75% dysfunctional 70% dysfunctional mitochondria and not necessarily notice. It's once we pass that 70% threshold, we'll start
Okay.
we'll start to see symptoms. So
Okay. Yeah, and you know what? I'm gonna jump. Yeah, okay. That's important because that's the marker for actually experiencing maybe what we'll term fatigue, or you'll notice, okay, the physiological effects. I'm glad you highlighted that. And of course, so this stuff is being studied and there's actual data on all this now too, right? And how this is affecting
well,
our health, right?
Dr. Douglas Wallace is one of the pioneers and leading researchers in mitochondrial health. And yeah, he's a brilliant man. And the Dr. Robert Navio it's Naviaux,
Nabi? Okay, Nabio.
and is on the cell. He coined the term the cell danger response. Dr.
Okay,
Robert.
okay, no, the first one you mentioned too was Dr. Wallace, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, no, I'll add them there in I mean because these are people that are studying these things and this is like because this is the cutting edge. This is with all the technology that we have, right? At least there's people that are actually doing well the scientific study, right? Like with what's actually going on, what can we observe, right? And of course, eventually it makes its way, to the public and into mainstream, right? But okay, no, thank you for mentioning their names too. I'll add them up.
Yeah. So with respect to the mitochondria, I know I don't want to just highlight all these horrible things that are happening, but
All
what we
good.
do, there are really simple lifestyle changes that can be made to bring us back into harmony. Yes, we're in a modern world that where it's very different from what our ancestors lived under.
Mhm.
So there is nuance into how we can implement these lifestyle changes, but the sicker you are, the more you have to focus on it. Like right now, just as an example, I'm sitting in front of my computer with it's being hardwired and my Wi-Fi is not on and my computer the power source is unplugged. So my computer's not plugged in. I'm using the battery.
Okay.
I have it hardwired, so I have as little EMFs as possible around my computer. I actually have a red light panel right beside me. I've got windows and doors open because you just need to open them a crack to allow natural light to come in so I can get that sense of the real time of day. And at nighttime, if one needs to be on the computer, you can actually turn your screens red. So you can turn your phone screen red. I don't know if you have an Apple or an Android, but
I got Apple.
Apple, you can do it very simply. I can tell you after,
Okay.
you can just Google it on YouTube. It actually, there's
Oh
about
yeah.
a two
Sure.
minute video, but the dimmer function in the iPhone doesn't work. It doesn't reduce the blue. You have to actually turn the screen red.
Okay,
With
I didn't know that,
Yeah,
yeah.
with an Android, there's an app called Twilight you can do that with. But on the computer, there's also a software program called Iris Tech, and it's $60 lifetime updates. So they've got a whole bunch of different programs, health, gaming, reading, nighttime. There's a whole bunch of different ones on there. So at night, you can turn it to night mode and it turns it red. It's not as easy to look at, but it's better at helping, again, signal to your mitochondria what time of day. So it starts to increase that melatonin and the drive to sleep and get all the hormone sequences in order in the proper timing.
Well, yeah, and like you said, this is about balance. What I like about what you're discussing too is just keeping it's not freaking out, right? It's just more so like, yeah, like having some mitigation strategies and balancing it out between, yeah, doing nothing from just being aware that maybe, yeah, this is what I like about what you're doing is just maybe you're fatigued, like maybe take a few basic steps and see if you notice some improvements, right?
Yeah, well, with a lot of people, I've found that sometimes the just doing a few little things,
Yeah, just
well, doesn't necessarily move the needle, and it depends where they are at in terms of their mitochondrial dysfunction.
sure. Yeah. It's
Because
it's a case by case, right?
Yeah, it is. Someone who's otherwise healthy, feeling okay, they might be able to get away with getting 15 minutes of sun
Yeah.
morning or sunrise light, but someone who's really sick, they're going to need to spend as much time as possible outdoors to get the restoration of the signal.
Yeah.
And the one of the other things that is really underrated and I would say dismissed a lot of the time is grounding, earthing.
Yeah. I do that once in a while now because everyone tells me it's good for me, right?
Well, and
But
it really is. The research is out there as well. And what it does, we used to be connected to the earth 24/7. Now that we're indoors again and or wearing shoes that are rubber or synthetic materials, we're not connected to the earth. And the earth is an abundant repository of electrons. So and people, whether were aware of that or not, I'm sure you understand about lightning. That really is
yeah, it's a buildup of
charged,
electrons, and then it
right?
basically once it gets there's enough force up there, it it seeks balance between the ground of the earth from the electrons in, the atmosphere. That's basically, yeah, I
Right.
butchered that explanation, but and then that's why you get the static charge. It's like a gigantic static discharge.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
the earth is a repository of electrons. And while we
Yeah.
think of food as being our energy source, it's actually only a third of our energy source, but where the food ultimately breaks down into is electrons to fuel our mitochondria to make energy.
So
So
it's all electric at the end of the day, eh? See,
it
isn't that
is
interesting, right? Power, light. I agree. Like this is fantastic. Like, because yeah, and like the end result is just the like you said, the physical symptoms and the physicality of us, but it's all coming from a higher level of
energy,
control that we're only just kind of starting to touch on now, right? Yeah.
right? So the electrons fuel our mitochondria. So we can tap into it's only a third comes from food, a third comes from the earth, and a third comes from the sun. The sun striking our skin. There's so many different things that happen, but one of them is the photoelectric effect, what Einstein told us about, what he won the Nobel Prize for. And that is when the sun strikes our skin, it creates a free plasma of electrons in our body. So we get a third of electrons from the sun. We should be getting them. So if we're not getting them from the sun and the earth, we're going to eat a lot more food because we need more electrons. That's one of the things. We're disconnected from the earth and we don't get enough sunlight. So maybe you can relate to the fact that, sometimes in the summertime, you don't feel like eating as much as you do.
Oh yeah. Well, especially when you're hot too. I don't know what the explanation is for. I don't know if you understand that. Yeah, especially if it's hot outside, like all you want to do, of course, is just hydrate, right? But then your
Well,
appetite is reduced.
yeah, but there's a reason for that because we're getting a lot of electrons, fuel for our mitochondria from the sun. And
Okay.
the
Yeah,
the
so okay. Yeah, that's fair.
the
Yeah, I
blue
noticed
light,
that for sure. And
yeah, the blue light also um, slows down the energy production, so we don't need as much fuel. We don't need as much electrons. We don't need as much food, right? But
it's good. Yeah, you understand this stuff. I haven't had a conversation like this, and it's great. Like I just enjoy learning with you, right? In this respect, yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I can speak to my own experience, but I don't necessarily understand uh,
why?
the science because you have to invest the time. And then of course, who has the time for everything? But yeah, no, thank you for it's good education. It's good knowledge. So
But I hope to impart to people that if they start to understand why things are the way they are, and
yeah.
it helps people make a shift and more motivation, more consistency with changing their lifestyles and practices if they understand the reasons behind it, rather than just having
Being
someone tell
told.
you to do
Yeah.
something.
I agree. No, like, yeah, I like your approach. Yeah.
Yeah. So the mitochondria, what I was talking about, the fuel for the mitochondria being the electrons, literally the last sort of cycle in the mitochondria is called the electron transport chain, and they pass electrons from one step to another. There's 5 steps in there. The very last step, we're coming back around now to ATP. The very last step in those 5 steps is the production of ATP. That what we have thought of as energy currency. The step before that, which is happens at the 4th step, which is called cytochrome C oxidase, that is where water and carbon dioxide are produced. We also make infrared heat in our mitochondria in that electron transport chain, as well as reactive oxygen species. I talked about those being signaling molecules. That water production at the 4th step is incredibly crucial. That is where true hydration of our cells comes from, not from drinking. The drinking water, it's important to drink water, but that mostly goes to fill our blood volume and the extracellular space, um, the
The
tissue space
space between.
outside of
Yeah.
the cells. And
Okay.
while that's important, our cellular hydration is where our health is measured. And what happens with this water that's produced, there's a whole bunch of steps that happen before to make sure that this water uh, is deuterium depleted. So deuterium is a form of hydrogen. It's a heavy hydrogen. So hydrogen is the lightest element on the periodic table. It's one proton in the middle and then one electron circling it.
Hmm.
So deuterium, there are three types of hydrogen found on the planet, but deuterium is a sister, it's called an isotope, a sister
Yeah.
molecule. So it's got one proton and one neutron in the middle and a hydrogen circling around. So that's found naturally in bodies of water. So that ends up in food as well. But at the equator is the highest amount of deuterium. And as we go up in latitude, it becomes less. But the importance of that is our mitochondria cannot have deuterium inside because it will destroy the ATP motor. So it does a whole bunch of steps to kick out all of the deuterium and make specifically deuterium depleted water. So there is no deuterium in that water because water is H2O, right? Water is
Yeah.
hydrogen and oxygen. So technically, if that hydrogen is a deuterium, then it would be a heavy water. So that water, the reason it is deuterium depleted is because where ATP is made, you can liken it's like a little nanomotor and the hydrogens funnel through the ATP motor. Now it would be like a basketball being thrown through a hoop. That's how tightly it's fit, right? So hydrogen goes through a basketball. So a basketball goes through a basketball hoop, and that's the hydrogen going through the ATP motor, and ATP is made on the other side. So the basketball hoop is wide enough for one basketball, like the proton. But now imagine if you have deuterium, that would be like having two basketballs trying to go through one hoop. So
I
you're either
see.
going to get stuck or it's going to break the basketball hoop. So that's what happens when deuterium gets into the mitochondria. It either gets stuck in the motor, and then there's a whole backlog of all the steps before, which can cause problems, which causes mitochondrial breakdown, or it will break the ATP motor, which again will have a backlog, but that has other ramifications. And so then we have damage to our mitochondria. And I talked about earlier how mitochondria make the energy. If we don't have any energy, just like a cell phone that doesn't have any battery, it can't do all the functions it needs to do. It needs to prioritize life in the cell phone. So the same with us. If we have mitochondrial breakdown, we start to adapt and prioritize what needs the critical functioning first. And so we start to have breakdown in different parts of our body if we don't have enough energy, if we don't have enough healthy mitochondria. Does that make sense?
I'm listening. Yeah. I mean, it sounds logical to me. I mean, like, do you have people that come in and do you assess them? Like, are there tests that you can do to kind of assess where people are at in terms of like whether these things are can you determine like can you diagnose, I guess is what I'm asking. Or is it just more of like a generic kind of you have to kind of self-assess, or can you determine individually, like just say some of your patients are
You
suffering
mean,
from this stuff.
well, so what modern medicine has done is when we've got symptoms, a cluster of symptoms, we put a label on it and call it a disease. So there's over 36,000 names of different diseases in modern medicine. We've divided things up thinking they are separate entities, and that's how modern medicine runs. We've got a specialist for everything, a subspecialist, and they focus on that particular organ or part of the
Okay,
organ.
do you agree with that though? Do you agree with how they break down?
Well, so this is what I'm getting to.
Okay.
So because you asked me about how do we diagnose what I'm just talking about, or
Yeah.
how to figure out if someone's got a problem. Um, so Dr. Doug Wallace has on the low end said that 85% of chronic diseases are due to mitochondrial dysfunction. Other people argue that it's 95%, and there's really only 5% that would be from genetic mutations. Even then, some people argue that or would challenge that. But the reason we have symptoms that come up in different parts of the body for different people, and then we've named them diseases, is because there might be a weakness or mitochondrial dysfunction more than 70 or 80% in that particular tissue in that person. So if you have 80% dysfunctional mitochondria in your heart, you're going to display heart symptoms. If you've got
Sense.
70, 80% dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction in your brain, you're going to display some kind of cognitive impairment. So it's about symptom analysis. And it's about mitochondrial dysfunction. That's why I was saying at the beginning, our life, our health, and everything is expressed because of either mitochondrial health or mitochondrial dysfunction.
Dysfunction.
Yeah. So it is a matter of cellular health. Our bodies are made up of,
Yeah.
you'll hear different numbers
Numbers.
depending on what you read, but anywhere from 30 to 70 trillion cells, right? Every single tissue is made up of cells. Every organ is made up of tissues, organ systems of organs. At the basis, it's cells. And inside those cells, for them to run properly, a lot of things need to take place, but we need proper energy production. Without energy production, we're not alive.
Yeah.
So it's really about cellular dysfunction. So when you restore cellular function, mitochondrial function, therefore cellular function, it doesn't matter where you had any problems in your body, you're going to start to restore health. So you don't need to go targeting different specific areas like what
I
people
see
are
what you
doing
mean.
in modern
Like,
medicine.
so, okay, I got a question then. Okay, so are you able to like analyze? Okay, so of course, when a patient comes in, you would just say, what are your symptoms, basically, right? And then, like, are you able to diagnose like the cell's condition? Like, if a patient comes in to your practice, can you actually determine what that is? Like, can you
So,
test that?
so I don't do any testing
Okay.
of that, but I do know of people and offices, although I'm not sure this person is able to be, I don't know if their practice is still open.
Yeah.
But there are tests that can measure the voltage of a cell, and the voltage has to do with how much electrical current or like electrons, basically, how much
Yeah, the
potential
difference of
there
potential.
is.
Yeah, I get it.
And
Yeah.
so really, I've talked about before, electrons are the fuel for our mitochondria. So that is really at the essence of how we can
Cellular.
store energy is through electrons. And so we have an electrical potential, just like a battery, right? A
Yeah.
battery
Well, the
stores
positive and
electrons.
negative potential. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So our
It's the
body,
same.
it is the same. Our body actually stores energy. We have a potential that is called redox potential, and that's how we store electrons. That will determine the level of our health. So that is, we talked about earlier, the third point that we were going to talk about was water. That is where we store our redox potential, is in the water network in our body. So again, kind of coming full circle to the importance of our mitochondria making that water. That water helps us with our body battery. And, I like one of my mentors, Carrie Bennett, talks about how water is the battery and it's charged by light, charged by sunlight.
I love that. Okay, so water, yeah, that's what your mentor told you. That's a good. I like people that can take complex, their complex understanding and simplify it like that because that shows real understanding to me. Yeah, like ultimately it's like, okay, this is the summary of it, and I can give you the breakdown, right? Like, if you want to go deeper, well, here's 1,000 page report. But yeah, essentially that's what it is. So can you say that one more time?
Yeah. So water is the battery, and water is our body battery, and we are charged by sunlight.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, that was Carrie Bennett.
Gary Bennett. I'll just spell, I don't know. Gary Bennett, yeah. I'll guess.
And so people might be wondering how water is like a battery in our body, because we think, well, we drink water, it's a neutral pH, right? So it has to be, but once again, um, not taught in medical school, but the water that exists in our body is very different, in a very different phase from the water that we drink or the water outside. So we've learned about water being solid, liquid, gas. So we've got ice, liquid water, vapor. But the water in our body is actually in a different phase. It's called fourth phase. There's a bunch of different names if you look at the science, or if you read the scientific literature. But Gerald Pollack coined the term exclusion zone water. And the reason he termed it exclusion zone is because what happens in our body is the water, when it touches and is next to a biological surface, which is just about every part of our body, except for in the inside of the blood vessels where it's blood, or yeah, the water's flowing. But when the water is next to a biological surface, it actually organizes itself into a liquid crystal structure. So it's considered a liquid crystal, and crystal is, there's an organization and a pattern, but it's liquid, it's not a solid. And it actually becomes H3O2 instead of H2O. So what that means is it kicks out an electron, or it kicks out a proton, sorry, which is a positive charge. So it leaves a negative zone right next to the biological surface, and then there becomes a proton wire. So you've got a separation of charge. That's what's ultimately happening. The way it organizes itself, it separates itself. So you've got a negative zone and then a positive zone. So that is separation of charge creates a battery.
Isn't that interesting? Like, yeah, like I love what you're talking about right now. Just talking about the electric component of who we are, and I mean, obviously, people have great understanding of this now, and it's interesting how it's all interconnected. Um, you know, and we are pretty amazing beings, when you just listen to some of the scientists and just doctors like yourself talk about this stuff, it's just like, wow. You look at the complexity of how everything is really working. It's truly, in my world, it's truly amazing, that we are what we are, It's very intelligently designed is how I will put it. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, like, and it just blows your mind, when you think about it. Just yeah, and I mean it's yeah, no, thank you. Anyway, carry on. I just kind of added those thoughts there. But yeah, yeah, it aligns with what kind of like I inherently believe. It's just that I don't necessarily have the actual like scientific understanding. But to me, like people, I mean, I have little tidbits, right? And it's clear that we really don't know half of, like, I wouldn't even say a quarter of anything, like it's just as our knowledge increases, and then we realize there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more to understand in medicine, right? And see, that's what I appreciate about what you're doing too. And you've realized that it's just the system is the system. And it's like there's nothing in place for, like, it's sort of like correction as the knowledge advances. It's like, well, maybe we need to include like a larger spectrum of thought in terms of how we, yeah, like treat the symptoms, right? And not be so like it's like we act like we've got it all figured out. And it's like that's the problem, is like thinking like that. See, thinking like that is wrong. Like to me automatically. Like it's wrong. Like to me, like yeah, maybe you can see this part of the physiology, but like you said, like, well, what about the light aspect? How is that affecting the physiology here, right? Or the magnetism or any of this stuff, right? Anyway,
It's interesting you say that, because that's come up um, with the fact that we rely so much on scientific papers and
yeah.
research to then use that data to implement strategies, therapeutic interventions into society. and everyone wants to see the paper that's telling you how to, why this is the way it is,
Yeah.
to rely on them. But one of the things that was brought up, which I had never even considered before, is all of the studies that are done, all of the studies, none of them are light controlled. None of them are
Hmm.
controlled for light. So they're done under artificial light.
And that's a great point you're bringing up. See, and because you have an understanding of that, and see, that's another variable, isn't it?
It's
Isn't
it,
it?
it is the variable that can have the biggest impact. So then basically
Yeah.
you could almost throw out all of the studies because you're not getting accurate information.
Like you said too, and the electromagnetic frequencies. I mean, there's multiple things. I mean, there's magnetism too. Like, I mean, there's all these elements. Like, I don't know what they do or don't do in that respect, but like you're telling me, okay, so the artificial light, that's not been factored in. And that, hey, if you're a real scientist, that has to be factored in. Everything has to be factored in. Everything that you have knowledge of has to be factored in my view. It just it's it or else you have to list it as a variable that wasn't factored in.
Right.
That would be the right thing to do, right? It's like, okay, we didn't factor that in. All right, well, at least you said it, because to me, when you try to hide it, it's worse for you in the long run because it's like then someone's going to come along eventually, like the younger generation, they'll be like, well, yeah, there's all kinds of things. And then all of us, because you were unwilling to like, make that statement that, okay, we didn't look at this. Anyway, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Well, so I want to touch on one more thing about the water because I didn't explain why it was called exclusion zone water because this is actually really important. Because what Dr. Gerald Pollack discovered in his lab was this layer. So you have this layer beside this, say, the cell membrane that is a negative zone, and then a positive zone. What experiments he did to show and verify this was anything, he put in different particulate matter in the water to see what would happen. And if you had this nice exclusion zone layer, nothing could penetrate that was larger than a proton or an electron. So any other molecules, this exclusion zone layer, so it excluded anything that was larger than a proton or an electron.
Yeah. And these, yeah.
Meaning any kind of toxins that you have in your body, any kind of bacteria, any fungus, any of those things that get into the cell to cause problems, if you have a nice, robust exclusion zone layer, it will not penetrate. It will not get into the cells. So lots of people talk about doing detoxes, parasite detoxes, heavy metal detoxes, all these things. And most of the time we are being run down because we don't have the fundamentals in place for the body to function the way it's supposed to, the way it's designed to. If we had a robust, again, we had a good redox potential, we had a really nice layer of exclusion zone water around all of the cells, it wouldn't matter that we have heavy metals floating around. We would get rid of
We
them
can't get in.
naturally. We would detox from anything, any of the, I mean, yes, there can be an overabundance in our environment right now, but we can help our body and support our body to detox naturally by making sure that our
Yeah.
body gets that foundations in place. So all of these other biohacks that people are doing, they won't even necessarily work if you don't have the cells working the way they're supposed to be working.
Yeah, I like that you're willing to say things like this because to me it seemed like that's why I feel like you're someone that looks for truth in all things, right? Because again, everything becomes a business in and of itself, and it's not wrong, like to come up with solutions. But like I think like yeah, like you the way that you're expressing this is right to me. Yeah. And again, isn't it interesting, right? That if we because it seems like, like someone like yourself could work a lot of people out of business, right? Because, I mean, if you create like even teaching points that you can prove, you know, like I don't know, like yeah, that a lot of the things that you can do quite naturally, right? And restore that health. And like you mentioned, like that, like I think it was only subatomic particles that could potentially get through, right? You know, anything bigger than that, you can't. Which, yeah, I mean, and if he can demonstrate that, right? See, that's what I like about these guys, right? Because they're using the scientific method, right, to show this stuff, right? Like you demonstrate, you know, you test, repeat, observe, and there you go. That's what science is, right? Real
And
science.
so with this exclusion zone water, how to make a nice, good, thick, robust layer, red and infrared light. So infrared light actually helps our body make more metabolic water. Or the red light, I should say, sorry. And the near infrared light, which we get an abundance of outside all day long, helps increase the size. So that was another scientific study that was done. What was near infrared light increases that layer by 4 times when you are under it. So if you're under infrared light, which you don't have to do anything, just go outside, that
Yeah,
helps to increase that layer. But if we spend time indoors, right, we're reducing it. And we're also
yeah.
it's being blocked by the windows. So we're getting even less of it, which is why I have several infrared bulbs in my house, which I turn
Okay.
on all the time. So that's one extra thing that can be done. So again, this is where I say our modern world, there's nuance in how to get back to nature because we just don't live outside under the natural
Hmm.
conditions that we used to.
Oh, it's great. I mean, interesting stuff. Like, yeah, it's all good information. I like too that you're not like an alarmist, but you just kind of say it how it is and from based on your understanding and just you offer like yeah, like simple steps that people can take. And then you can base, you know, like assess it based on the changes you can see within yourself too, right? Like if you are experiencing chronic fatigue too, right? And take some of these steps, why not? It's not hard to do, right?
Right.
So, yeah. Is there anything else you want to highlight before we go?
Well, I guess I just wanted to touch briefly on, the things I've talked about, red light panels, and I've talked about the blue blocking glasses. And just in my bio, you talked about the last thing about LifeWave. And so I just
Yeah.
wanted to mention that that's something that I have been using now for a year. I got involved because of my mom's health decline and her doctor's talking about surgery. And so anything I can do for her to avoid surgery, ironically, having had my entire career in the operating room, but that's why I've seen firsthand, if you can at all avoid surgery, then that's what I would recommend.
Yeah.
So my mom, because of her heart, um, I had been introduced to this through a lady who was a cardiac surgical nurse for 20 years, and she started to show me clinical, but also investigations like echocardiograms, electrocardiograms of patients, people who had been using these patches for 8, 10, 12 months have changes in their heart function that I've never seen in my entire career. She had never seen, and she'd been in cardiac for 20 years.
That's
So
true.
that was knowing about light, learning about light for the couple years before, then learning about how these patches use our own light. So as a red light panel, we plug into an outside source, right, of power. Then we use an outside source of light. These patches use our own inside source of light to create the physiologic changes. So nothing's going into the body. It's just reflecting light back into the body to cause the changes. Just like we make vitamin D from the sun, we make melanin from the sun, the skin, like the tan that we get in our skin, that's from melanin.
Yes.
This this increases a copper peptide that we have that increases our own stem cell activity. So again, people may be familiar with invasive stem cell therapies, injections, where you're using someone else's or you even harvesting your own, but there's risk, there's potential for complications, whether it's even effective or not. Health Canada deemed them illegal as of a few years ago, so they're no longer available in Canada. You have to go to other countries. So this is almost like your own stem cell therapy using your own body's mechanisms. So for me, that was it's the top tool that I use because um it's the most natural in my opinion because we're using our own mechanisms. It's just enhancing and supporting what our body already is exquisitely designed to do with the substances our body already has in it. So it's
Mhm.
not causing any imbalances anywhere. The body knows what to do with what tools, like what's already there.
Yeah, it's just like it triggers it, right? Like it's like a boost, if you will, it seems
Right.
to be.
And so again, people believe what they see in front of them. And so for myself, my mom went from having to stop every 2 to 3 steps to catch her breath because she's got significant heart failure. Within 2 weeks, she was able to, we walked together regularly. She was able to walk for blocks on an incline and talking to me at the same time, which is to me just absolutely miraculous. And again, I didn't understand the mechanism of action from a physical standpoint. I had the fortune of actually being able to speak with David Schmidt, the inventor, and he explained it. And from an energetic standpoint, it actually absolutely does make sense. After 3 weeks, she had her thyroid medication lowered by her doctor. And since then, I've just been seeing miracle after miracle the undeniable, the stories are undeniable that
That's
it works.
yeah, it's great. I mean, I've what I remember too, this stuff was originally, I think, designed for the Navy SEAL guys, right? Like,
Correct.
I mean, it's pretty impressive stuff. I mean, you got to have an open mind, right? I mean, people always dismiss everything. I mean, it's just, well, take a look at it, right? Like, I mean, do some reading. It requires intellectual effort, right? Like, people just kind of cherry pick, like, oh, I don't want to believe in this. Why? Oh, I don't know. I just, it's got nanotech. I mean, I've heard it all, right? And it's just like, you know what? Because people create their own like do the intellectual work, and know why, like at least know why, or you take the position you take, or else you're better off to just say that I don't know, right? That's what I think anyway. But yeah, no, I mean, I have no problem with these things, not at all, considering all the other garbage that's out there with big pharma rolls out and there's zero accountability. Like the way I look at it now, right? It's just the whole system's been captured and it's a real shame. It's a real shame. It really is, because in the end, we're only harming ourselves and our children, the next generation's coming up, and it's, the very system that's supposed to be there to, it's funny how it is at the surface level of things. It's become the very opposite. It's like an upside down world now, right? And we need strong people to work the force of correction. Like I look at every individual as like a cell, if you will, in a greater body of things. Like you're one, I'm one. Some people like in the transhumanists call us pixels, right? But I like to look at this as like like you would be like a white blood cell, if you will, right? Kind of battling against all the evil garbage out there, right? Within your realm of understanding, right? We all operate within our realm of understanding, and that's the way I see it. Like everything is like a microcosm of a macrocosm, if you will, and it just depends, like what forces of motivation drive you. You got to take a good look at yourself. Some people it's money, some people it's power, some people it can be anything. You just need to know within yourself, what are you doing this for? you know, and then just know that answer for yourself and, continue your work. That's the way I look at it. But again, yeah, sorry, I'm jumping in again. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Because I keep cutting you off there. So,
Well, I just wanted to, I guess, a couple of things, and I'll be quick.
oh,
The
that's fine. Yeah, you can take the time you want. Yeah.
we talked a lot about light and mitochondria and all this sort of, well, not sort of, all the this energetic part of what affects our body, but our thoughts and beliefs are really paramount and can transcend everything else because our
Yeah,
thoughts
I'm glad you said that.
are as well electromagnetic frequencies. So although there's a lot of stuff in our environment that we can't control, the power of our thoughts are immense. And I just want to share this last story. And this was, so I'm in a practitioner mentorship group with Carrie Bennett, so who I was talking about earlier is
Mhm.
a mentor. And she was telling a story. She had just gone to an event, and a speaker that she was listening to was talking about how she used, I'm not sure if people are familiar with the BioWell technology. It measures the light field around the human body. So it actually is a visible measurement. And so you can
Hmm.
see the light around. And so this woman has been using this BioWell for 15 years, and she's some kind of teacher, but she would just experiment with her students and all this stuff. And apparently, this one experiment she did, she put two people in different rooms, completely blocked, like cement rooms. So they couldn't see each other. There were no windows or anything.
Hmm.
She told one person to send loving thoughts and supportive thoughts to the other person in the other room. And they measured, she said she measured with this instrument and showed a photo of light coming out of the person's heart,
Hmm.
like a
Wow.
beam of light
Yeah,
coming
that's
out of the person's
powerful.
heart. So it just it just
Gary Bennett, eh? Gary Bennett.
reinforces, yeah, it
Yeah, wow.
reinforces the
Yeah.
idea that the thoughts and really connecting the thoughts and the feelings that we have, right? It has a physical impact on everything, including ourselves, the information in ourselves. That's a whole, the water, that's a whole other topic I could talk on as well, the consciousness of water, right? And then we are in fact 99% water by molecular count. The 60 to 80% is by weight, but we're 99% water. So information that is held in water, when we speak to it, that is held within us. So it's important how we
Well,
think, how we speak.
I'm really happy you brought that up because even in our long-term personal relationships too, like it's just important to, be balanced too between the criticism and between, yeah, not withholding love from one another. I mean, I look at that in my own relationships, right? And just being balanced in that too between, positive criticism, between making sure someone feels loved too, right? Because like you just said, that's proof, right? I mean, I don't know what people want anymore, right? I mean, if the doctors and scientists are proving these things too, right? Like where there's actual evidence, it's like, man, like, this is no longer something that you can, it takes faith to deny it. Let me just put it that way, right? When it's like you guys are proving, scientifically, like we talked about the power of the spoken word, right? Like vibratory frequencies, all these things, right, have a power, have an effect, and I remember that. And yeah, like I think you're fantastic. I mean, it's great what you're doing, right? Because you're bridging the gap between a lot of these things that were always kind of like maybe somewhat in the realm, at least in the general consensus of things, somewhat theoretical, but it's like, no, not anymore, right? Like with being able to prove things in the empirical world that we live in, it's like, now what are you guys going to say, right? Can't say too much, right? If you've got, here's the evidence, here's the scientific evidence, right? Hmm, you know, and it's amazing to see all this stuff. That's why I appreciate just yeah, talking. I mean, you are an outside of the box thinker. I mean, the pioneers, right? You guys are like carving new ways of doing things. And to me, the younger people that think for themselves are going to follow for sure. Like, because this is where things are going and the old system's going to be dying out. And it's interesting how some of this stuff, I believe some of this stuff was known thousands of years ago, if I can put it that way, right? But it's like all of a sudden, it's like we're reawakening to things that were already known. And then there's a lot of ancient texts out there that suggest that they knew these things, some of these things. But we won't get into all that, right? But yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's I really like that. Like the power of your thoughts, what you speak to, the effect it has, because it does. That's why we have to have somewhat of an armor too, against our enemies for sure, right? Because yeah, it has an effect on us for sure. So you got to armor up. Um, but yeah, okay. Well, anything else? Anything else? I keep going on tangents here.
Yeah, that's okay. No,
Yeah.
I'm,
We can go over your web. Do you want to go over your web page or
oh
I
yeah.
can
So when people
let
want
me
to
share the
talk
screen
to me,
here. Okay, here we go. I'll pull it up. Here we go. Yeah, you can see it, right? This is
oh yeah, now I can, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
okay.
So that's my website. It's rachelmauricemd.com. And
Yeah.
read up resources. Yes, I have a products recommendation page. I've got podcasts
Pod-
there.
Yeah.
And then under work with me is how you can find out.
Where's that? Oh, I can't get rid of that. Oh, here, hold on. I'm just gonna get rid of this. There we go. Work with me. Do you want me to click on that?
Sure. Yeah, there's the luminous healing is the trauma release work that I do, and the return to wellness is all what we've been talking about, which includes everything. It's just some people like the trauma release work specifically. And then I've got a
Yeah.
life page there if anyone's interested in those patches to learn more, to
Yeah.
attend kind of Zooms. I do Zooms regularly myself and with other people. So
Yeah, you do. You're doing a lot. Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's,
And I'm also on Instagram, Rachel underscore Maurice underscore MD, and Facebook, Rachel Maurice.
yeah,
And, and I have an app as well that I had
you
just
do.
haven't been promoting because I'm still in the works, but it is available. It should be if you scroll down
Oh,
through
okay.
the page,
Down
uh,
the page.
and
Oh, is it
there,
this?
got an app there.
Easy
Yes,
Energy?
yes.
Oh,
It's just my name, Rachel Maurice MD, on the Apple as well. It's available on Android and on there. Yeah.
okay, nice. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I mean, I like your website too. It's very professional. Um, yeah, I mean, you guys are doing great things, so it's great to be in your knowing. And yeah, because you're using like your intelligence for good, the way at least you've got my approval and I don't approve of most people. So not that that matters so much, but I mean, I think that what you're doing is like you're on the right course. This is where like I mean, and I would encourage government like, to take a look, right? And to actually start thinking outside of the box like you guys. Like, you've got to start admitting when error because the more that you resist admitting your own errors, the worse it becomes and the greater the downfall will be in the end. And it might take a couple generations, right? But like, I don't know, it's like the pride, right? The pride comes before a fall. If you can't admit your mistakes or like, that you didn't at least admit that you didn't have all the knowledge or we do need to do a lot of work in Canada. There needs to be a lot of work done because the arrogance and the pride within the system is just it's just unreal. But I realized, right, because of all the legal implications but like that's the thing. That's why the fall and the destruction of the system to me will be even greater. That's my view. But I mean, they're just going to keep storming along, right? It's a real shame because there was a real opportunity, in every country, right, to just do what's right, choose what's right, you know. Don't just dismiss things that you don't know about. Oh, I found one error here, so that means I throw out 99% of all the other good things she's doing. I mean, that's a ridiculous way of thinking. We're all learning, we're all on a journey, and we just need to start having a better attitude, and there needs to be like a system in place for when governments go wrong. There needs to be something like how do we move forward? But to me, there's literal no acknowledgement of almost anything in Canada. It's a real shame. But anyway, anything else you'd like to share before we sign off here?
I think that
Okay,
I think we've said it all.
pretty well covered it. Okay, okay, I'll stop sharing the screen here. Okay, again, yeah, it's thank you, Dr. Rachel Maurice, for your time. Again, she's got her I'll just read your Bachelor of Science in Microbiology and Immunology, right, from McGill University, Montreal, and then your Quebec and your medical degree, University of British Columbia in Vancouver, BC. And anesthesiology residency, University of Alberta, right? Like Edmonton, you got your AB Reiki first and second degrees. And I mean, her credentials just go on, guys. I'll leave that in the write-up, but I want to thank you for your time. And again, check out her website and, like yeah, it's okay, to be in error and it's okay not to know. And I think it's really important to listen to doctors like Dr. Maurice here, and let's move forward as a society in our thinking. And again, thanks for your time, Rachel. I really appreciate it. Yeah,
Having
you,
me,
you take you take
everyone.
good care of yourself, right? And thanks again. Bye for now.